I'll jump right into it and just tell you like what I've got out here. I brought a few examples of things in various states, right? So I just make dumb heads like this, and I use a very limited array of glazes, and it's all low fire. If you have tech questions or if you want to ask questions along the way, just do it. But this is the Bracker's Terracotta. Um, I like it because it's pretty versatile, and it's got some tooth to it, so you can go thick or you can go thin. And the way that I end up finishing surfaces, they're kind of rough anyway, so I don't need anything that's like super smooth like porcelain would be, right? And so I cranked out a couple of pieces yesterday afternoon just so that I could join them together. So I'll just assume everybody's familiar with ceramics, the ceramics process, but this is almost leather hard, right? When you get the clay out, I'll just show you what I did to get these pieces. Normally, I would wedge for quite a while, but I don't trust this table, so I'll just do it like this. So we're not gonna keep any of this anyway. But I just make coil pots and pinch pots. That's how these things are made, and these things. But this is about as basic as it gets. Pinch pots, right? If you noticed, I started out with one solid ball of clay and then I ripped it in half, basically. So what I'll have is that these two halves will be hopefully the same diameter. So I'm just pushing it right over the thumb. And normally when I'm working in my studio, if I know I very rarely / never just make one thing at a time. I'm usually making lots of things because I find that with ceramics, timing is half the battle. When to do something, when not to do something. As the clay firms up, it allows you to do certain things, and when it's this fresh and squishy, at some point it can't hold its weight and it wants to move around, and then you're fighting it. And I'm not a fighter. I like everyone to get along. So that's it, right? This is as basic as it gets. So that's what I did with these two, and where's it at? I know we're in a ceramic supply store and they love to sell you all the tools, but I find tools in all sorts of places. I've had this for 25 years. I don't even know what its original purpose was. Well, this is dangerous. Yeah. What is it for? Well, I don't know. I think it's pretty stout. I wouldn't put that on my head, but it's never going to break. Knock on wood. Yes, slip and score. You all know all about that. Oh shit. I know. Thank you. I'm gonna need you, Kate. I just mixed up a little slip when I came in this morning. And for those of you who don't know, slip is just the clay body in liquid form. And so typically, I'm at this stage in the game pretty loose or aggressive with it. Better safe than sorry. So like that, what I said earlier about timing being half the battle, I I do believe that. I also think clay has a memory, and so the more you can work it in different directions and confuse it a little bit, the better off you're going to be. An example of that would be if you're rolling out slabs and you just push it in one direction, as that dries, it wants to come back in the direction that you pushed it. So if you push it in different directions, as it dries, and this clay is going to shrink 12% maybe, it's going to physically move. So if you can keep it moving in directions, if you can help control that, you're better off. Okay. So I'm just compressing. So you might be asking, well, we know you're not supposed to trap air in there. Yes, I do know that. At some point, I'll poke a hole in it. But what I like at this stage of the game is to use that. Some people will use newspaper and then build around that. That's a totally great way to do it. I like this way. And so then I'm just going to work over that seam. And with an hour demo, I mean, it's pretty much, you get an hour to make a mess and then clean it up. But I thought I'd show a few different techniques, probably not going to finish anything, but construction, and then I've got maybe some finishing techniques, and then glazing. So these are examples of some of the heads that I've made. This one's still in process. This is actually from a class I taught this summer over at the Lawrence Art Center. And then I brought some cups that I'll show you a glazing technique that I've been messing around with. And serrated ribs, everybody should have one.
I missed the first part. When you made the initial cast, the hemispheres,
Yep.
do you use a wheel at all, or was that just hand formed?
Just my bare hands.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't, when I started making work that I would consider my own, like for a while, I think in ceramics, people start off making other people's pots. It's totally normal. But I was making big pots and then putting heads on the thing on the top or on the sides, or doing drawings on the sides of things, decorating, right? And eventually I was throwing those. And eventually I couldn't come up with a good reason as to why I was making the pots, other than it's fun to make pots. And so I ditched it after a while, but I still like making pots, but I wouldn't consider myself a potter. Like these cups, that's about as far as I go these days. And I think of it like basketball. I can shoot a basketball, but I'm not really a basketball player. But I like
those cups you did out of wheel.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Most of the time, my wheel is just covered with other stuff. All right. So what this allows you to do when you've got the trapped air in there is there are limitations to it. Eventually, you could pop it, but I can manipulate this and be subtle. So like at some point, I would probably indicate where I might be putting the eyes and a mouth. And you think of it like a sketch. Like if you were making a painting or a drawing, you would start out kind of loose and then keep refining as you go. So all those finger dimples and the seam that you can still kind of see where I joined these two together, I'll eventually work those out. I don't get too caught up in it at this point. And then I have lots of other ribs that I will refine with. This fine establishment has plenty that they can sell you. These rubber ones are great, but then other I think this is for like grouting and things like that, but it's really quite stiff. I forget who I stole this idea from, but these ribs that you can get here, cutting it off, this right angle comes in pretty handy every once in a while to make certain kinds of lines. But at some point, I will start to work over that surface to get this kind of texture that you'll see here. So I'm going to leave this ball alone for now, and then maybe work on something that's slightly more interesting. And somebody keep me on track here. So again, this is something that I put together yesterday. If I had just coiled this thing out, I couldn't hold it like this. It would collapse. But there's air trapped inside. You can see the bottom is sort of poking out a little bit. Not concerned at this point. And so if I'm in my studio, I'll probably have, at least 4 of these going at a time. Because I don't know about you, but like my time is precious, or studio time is precious. So like starting one thing and then having to sit and wait for it to be able to do something with it at the next phase, I don't have time for that.
At this point, you already have a concept of what that's going to look like?
Not today, but in my studio I would. I did, when I came in this morning, I just pinched out, just like I did at the beginning with these 2 halves, parts that I'll add on. Again, with timing, like if I had a half a dozen of these going at the same time, I would also be cranking out a lot of bits and pieces like this. So the concept of whatever I'm going to be doing, I mean, I'm always within the same ballpark. They're always kind of goofy and they have bits coming off of them. But it starts with some kind of base, right? I love these tools. I don't think I bought them from Brackers, but you can buy things like this at Brackers. I ran an art center on an army base for a year and a half or so, and they shut it down. And so these suits came in and said, we're closing it down. You got to get rid of everything that doesn't have a property sticker on it. And I said, well, what do you mean get rid of? And they're like, we'll bring a dumpster and you'll throw it all away. Anyway, this is maybe not the conversation. But I parked near the dumpster for quite a while. And that's just a microcosm of maybe how the government might work. I said, there's a preschool down the street. Like, they could have all this paper and paint. And he said, son, it costs more to do that than to just throw it away.
Oh, good for you for reusing.
I'm still reusing. And then when I got into graduate school, I had boxes of this stuff. I was just selling it to students. Anyway, sketch, right? That's pretty basic, pretty silly. At some point, I'm going to, and I'll show you this, I'm like a jack-o'-lantern. I'll open up the back and then start to push the walls out a little bit more. But start to just articulate a little bit as to where things are going to go. And you are getting the Cliff Notes version of what I would normally do. Like I said earlier, why I like this particular clay body is that it's forgiving. So like adding a chunk of clay like this, I'm pretty sure I can get away with it. Other clay bodies, maybe not, because they shrink more. As long as you kind of know how to handle it. Handle it meaning construction, but then also like the drying process is important to monitor that.
Is that secret sauce?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I forgot in front of people. You know, I saw my old professor Dan Anderson he would do it all the time. He looked like he was frothing at the mouth, and somebody asked him about that once, and he gave some story about the power of bacteria, and I kind of believe it. Having mixed clay and like the things you do to put in your clay body, like some people would put like beer in it, all that bacteria wants to hold itself together, but maybe there's a cost to it. So what I'm going to do now is just cut a hole in the back. Uh, so then now I can't beat it around. I would have before you guys got here. And I'm going to show you how I construct this next. But all I'm going to do is make a hole big enough that I can fit my hand in. And I'll save this. So there's lots of ways to hand build. Coil building, it starts with coil building and slabs typically, or pinch pots. There are other like figurative artists who make heads that they don't do it this way. They might construct it more or as the finished shape as they're building it. I don't know. I think I don't have a good way of explaining why I do it other than I've done it long enough that it feels good to do it that way. But again, timing. You can't do this when the clay is fresh.
And you said you put the basic base together this morning?
I did this yesterday over at the art center, and then barely draped it with some plastic.
And it's about a little more than a half inch thick.
It's about a half inch, and I'm sort of aggressive with it. Like I'll make these things the walls thicker. I don't really personally care. Like I'm not making, like there's plenty of great examples here. Like this teapot is you're not supposed to touch it, but I did. It's super thin, very lightweight, but it's a teapot. Like I'm not asking you to like drink out of this or to use it. So as long as my walls are a consistent thickness, I kind of it doesn't really matter to me. So I'll make it a little thicker, knowing that I'm going to stretch this thing out. And like I said, the terracotta is pretty forgiving. These sort of stretch marks that start to happen, you'll see on the finished pieces, like sometimes I leave that in there. I think generally speaking, like the surfaces that I'm attracted to look weathered and some sort of hint at age or time or something, but they're also kind of cartoony and fresh in a way. So I like that contradiction, I guess. I have to look at it for a second. Sorry. Tools like this that are, I just grabbed a handful, but like paintbrushes, ends of paintbrushes or odds and ends work great for making different types of marks. I think it's pretty rare that a painter would use the same paintbrush for an entire painting. Like you got to mix it up. So now I'm going to quickly put together some eyes. I think similar to what I've done here. Yeah.
Is that low grade clay?
I'm sorry?
Is it low grade?
This it has grog in it for sure, but I know they have groggier clay. Raccoon clay will have a lot of grog in it. You'll have to ask them what that other clay body is. I don't know. At some point, like again, like not that this is like factory work, but like being efficient. Like if I brought in porcelain into my studio, it would be a nightmare. It would be dirty. I'd have to like completely scrub the room down, and the other way around. So I had never bought store-bought clay until I moved to Lawrence. I always mixed it, but then when I moved here, I didn't have access to a mixer. So this has been great, and I think not that this whole thing is a commercial for Brackers, but
The terracotta is a very good clay body. I used to use it as well. Yeah. And it's got like rock and sand.
but having access to a shop like this is a huge deal, because I've lived in places where you don't. You have to drive an hour and a half. Yeah. All right, so what I've done is just thrown a couple of balls in there, and then I'm making what are going to be like the eyelids. And I probably would have slipped and scored a little bit more, but for the purpose of what we're doing here, so that it's like that. And then I'll make the bags. Oops. Nope. So all the color on these finished pieces that you see, that's all coming from underglaze for the most part. I'm assuming you all know what fired terracotta will look like. It's kind of bright orange and just as you would expect. I like the clay body, but I sometimes don't like the terracotta to show through. So when you have, like something like this, I spend a lot of time with the underglaze, but the sort of heavy texture that I have in the clay body or in the clay structure itself, it's heavier and aggressive, and I know that as I start to layer all these glazes on, it's going to start to soften those aggressive marks. So I keep that in mind when I'm doing this phase of the operation. And so that I have a couple of other glazes that I like to use. One is kind of a semi-transparent crawl glaze. It's got a texture to it. So some of the texture that you see on these pieces comes from the glaze. It's not the clay. It's not something that I've made a mark and created. It's that glaze is mixed in a way that it's not supposed to work that way, but it separates from itself. It won't run. It just balls up. The hotter you get it, the more it balls up on itself. And so if I fire between like 04 to 06, I can manipulate to a certain degree the sheen. If I fire it hotter, it'll be glossier. If I mix the viscosity down before I apply it, it's just a semi-transparent glaze. Not food safe, but I'm not making pots. These cups, different glazes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. I think if I had a favorite spot in the process, this is probably it, where you can handle it and move it around, and it's not quite leather hard. Leather hard would be like a good cheese that can bend, and eventually it'll break. But all right.
Is there some reason why I started with the eyes as opposed to the nose alone?
Nope. Just habits. So I pinched these things out this morning. This is a little softer than I might normally do, but I would be embarrassed to leave this in such a state. So all I'm going to do is score this spot. And again, if I was in my studio and I had a bunch of these and a bunch of parts, I might play around like a Mr. Potato Head kind of a thing. Oh, I almost forgot. This would be a good time to poke a hole.
I was just gonna ask that.
There's got to be a hole somewhere, and so I'd rather it be right here than have to poke a hole in this nose. That's a little big for this guy, but you get the point. I do a lot of clowns, a lot of weird characters. But they all kind of start out in a similar way.
And why do you have the hole in the ball of the nose or in the face?
Because this nose, if it's gonna it's hollow, and so the air has got to go somewhere. And so eventually, if I were to finish this thing, I'm gonna plug this hole back up, do a lot more surface work. I think I made these to go up here like that. But again, I'm going to trap all that air back in there. But somewhere along the way, I'm going to make sure there's a hole plugged or a hole punched in there.
And it can be in the bottom as long as you have it up off the floor when you fire it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, often I don't remember where the hole in this guy is at, but it's in there somewhere because it's been through a couple of firings. I'll end up poking with the needle tool all over the place.
The needle hole is big enough.
The right needle. And it's also a way of kind of ensuring that I haven't forgotten, because I can forget. It's happening more and more lately in my life. See what I did? I forgot to poke the holes. You all caught that, didn't you? Just pretend that I did.
I think you did that on purpose.
Just making sure you're paying attention. Yeah, I could, but I think there are other things I want to show y'all, and this is just one part of it. But to make something like this, a form like this, like that head shape, it's coil building, right? You all know about coil building, hopefully. Often, folks will roll out their coils almost to the diameter of what they want the wall to be. I do it a little bit differently. But this is how I make forms like that. All of these heads that you see here, this is how it started. So I'll make the base. And again, I probably would have wedged this out. But something around that thickness. Let's see. Need more table space or less stuff. How about that? It's my fault. I'll put it there. I have. I find it more work. The more stuff I have to clean, the less happy I am. So it's just one more thing. And maybe you'll see why. Like, I like this method. So obviously, I'm not going to make something that's that thick, but I'm going to start out that thick. And rolling out a coil, I think I'll talk about this, especially with folks that are beginning. It's not, I'm applying my pressure when I pull it back. That's when I'm doing the manipulating of the clay. And I like to have the heel of my my hand on the surface area, because that's what I want. I want something that's pretty much the same thickness. So instead of making coils, I sort of make strips or belts. And so maybe, I don't know if traditional is the right word, but if I were to roll out coils, it would take me probably 3 of them to get 3 inches or whatever it is. I'll just leave it there. This is the part where a banding wheel is super handy. Or a wheel. Don't do that at home. But at this point, so I've just set it on there, right? It's not going to be attached. But I often, like I did with this heather head, I'm not too concerned about making that wall and the base line up exactly. I'm going to clean it all up at some point. At this point, what I want is a good connection. Because if it's not connected, it doesn't matter what you do later on, it's going to fall apart. So you might as well get this part right. So what I'm doing is pinching and pushing down. That's it. And then we do this. So the drawback to this is if you're trying to make a form that's like really bulbous, it's a little trickier, and your slabs or your coils need to not be as tall. But at this point, if I wanted this to come out like that, I would just do it. Get it going in that direction. And I don't care about this this point or that junction right now. And let's grab a little more.
Now, typically, even though you're coiling, you'd wedge that clay. Oh,
Yep. Yeah, I have a one table that's all. It's got plaster that's, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches thick, and it's heavy and sturdy, and you can slam it around. And but then once I've done that, then I'll do what I'm doing right now, which is, I think, it's like an extruder. When you're making pieces that are maybe twice the diameter, you can't be as casual about how you're picking these things up. Physics still applies. So all I'm doing right now is kind of making sure that it's right directly on top of that first coil, and then I'm taking my middle finger and I'm pushing down on the inside, and so it's kind of raking over that this first coil. And I think it's good to have that next coil a little longer than what you need, because the opposite of that is a drag. So again, for me, like if I'm making multiples, like the steps along the way, it is sort of a factory situation where I make parts. And so if I went into my studio on a Friday and I cranked out a bunch of these forms and just let them sit, and I've got little bits and pieces that I know I'll make a nose or ears, then the next day when I come in, I can start manipulating. That's the kind of efficiency I like, because then it allows me to play more rather than waiting.
Then your scene for the second one is at a different place than the scene for the first one?
It is. Yes, thank you for asking. She asked where I joined that first tier. It was over here. It is good. Again, confusing the clay, like when you stagger those things or don't line. If you can get away with it if it's all lined up. Clearly, that's what we're doing horizontally here. But where you can mix these things up, and so like this part that I'm doing right now, where I've gone this way, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go this way. I find it doesn't hurt anything. In fact, I think it helps with that clay memory idea. So that's it. I would just keep going, and then the very top, like I would taper that in, and then the very top is, something like this. I trap that air. I'd have it on a board, and then that's it. Pretty boring, right? Coil building, but that's it. So I'll get rid of this guy.
And when you tore out those pieces out of there, you're not using a scale to weigh it. You just done it so often, you know what full handful.
Yes, to a certain degree. Yeah, just a handful, just like a pinch of this or that.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of how it works. All right.
would you spend more
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think that construction method, which you all have to be familiar with, coil building is as basic as it gets. Making sure that those any place that you're joining clay, you've done all you can to ensure that those parts are going to hold together, because none of it matters if it's not joined well together. It's gonna clay will find a way to hurt your feelings. Okay. Um, that's kind of it on the construction, I think. I was going to show some glazing, and in my own studio, and you all certainly know this, like you're not firing one piece in your kiln at a time. Like you're going to make enough work to fill it, and so you work in. I think that's part of the attraction to ceramics for me is that there are steps and there's process and there's structure. There's a lot of play within there, but I like the order of it all. And so when I make things, then I put them through the bisque process, and then I clear the decks in my studio, and now it's just glazing. And I very rarely like work with wet clay and then come over here and glaze. It's usually different phases to it. And so these examples, which aren't my greatest, they're actually quite dirty. They've been in this. Where's Ling Long? Oh, she's over there. They've been in the ceramic studio over at the Art Center, and they're dusty. But the construction technique that I just showed you, that's exactly how this thing was built. Difference being, like I put this, weird skirt foot on the bottom. Broke it before I was taking it to the class to show them as an example last week. But this is basically like a black underglaze, a gray, and then ivory. I mean, you can get any color you want over there. And I think of underglazes like acrylic paint, like you kind of know what you're going to get. And before I apply those and blend them, which I'll show you here in a second, this green that you see that kind of bleeds through all over the place, that's copper carbonate. And so you get that in a granular form and then just water it down. And the heavy texture that I've applied to the sculpture, I put it into those crevices, and then I take a wet sponge and I wipe it off. A little bit goes a long way, but what I like about it is copper will fume, and it looks a little ghostly to me, and it looks like copper that patinas. And so copper goes on first, and then it's black, gray, white, and I'll show you how I apply underglaze. I do it, again, pretty aggressively, and I let that dry, and then there's a glaze that's this crawl glaze, and you all can handle this stuff before we leave. Maybe you can see it a little better on the back. This sort of crackly texture, that's from the glaze. The glaze, as it fires, pulls apart. And I want that. And so I can control that to a certain degree. Like this is really aggressive. In fact, I'm sharing too much probably, because you'll start, if you see any of my other work, like this shape right here that you kind of faintly see where these platelets are kind of chunky, it's probably this brush that went like that. You see how it's the same thickness? That glaze is just a glaze that I've mixed up, and it's the thickness of a melted milkshake, like most glazes are, kind of that kind of viscosity. But I'll be very aggressive with it. But the color, this piece, is orange to red to a different, or orange to yellow, and then a different yellow up here. This is just black, gray, and then like an ivory beige up there. Does that make sense so far? All right. And then this piece was this color when I pulled it out of the first firing. It's white, but you can see that fade, from dark to light. You can see the copper bleeding through. You can see how this crawl glaze starts to crawl. And then what I did here this morning with some black underglaze is I'll cover this entire thing, let that dry, and then I take like old t-shirts or shop towels and wipe that away, because I want the black to fill in those cracks, not the terracotta color. So theoretically, I could underglaze this whole thing in black while it was still leather hard, but I've never felt good about it. It starts to wash away some of that aggressive texture that I like, and so I prefer to just bisque with the marks that I've made and then bring color into it. So I'll show you. It's really boring. Just wiping things off. It can be. It's really tedious, and it's difficult to do sometimes. And really, it comes down to how thick you apply that black. I've tried thinning it down, thinking that'll make it easier to sand off. I've tried sandpaper, those little green scrubby pads, all the while like making sure I'm not creating a bunch of dust. But I keep coming back to like old shop towels and t-shirts. My grandfather was an auto body guy, and I have all of his shop. I have like a 50-gallon drum full of old shop rags. I'll never go through them all. But if I take a sponge, it takes way too much off. So I think a distinction in my creative, tenure is, and I don't know if this is true for you all, but like I used to spend 80% of my time making and 20% glazing, and I've found that I'm almost in the opposite end of that spectrum now. I'm spending at least half my time glazing.
You ever use oxides?
Yeah. I like the copper. I've used red iron. Nickel is okay sometimes, but that green works for me, and a little bit goes a long way. So you can start to see the texture that maybe you can't see in something like that area, and you can come up and look at it later, but there's texture in there that you won't see if I just left it without this black embellishment. It doesn't come through. This is not the kind of towel I would use.
You said it was copper carbonate?
Yes. They'll sell it to you here. As much as you want. But really, I mean, the green that you see here, like it's really not a lot at all. If you're too aggressive with it, then you now have a green head. So that's, I mean, I'm not going to do this whole thing because it is boring to watch, but that's just to illustrate the effect. I think some folks, I think that this was actually like this. It's kind of a hard thing to visualize. These areas, the red that you see here and the brown on this hair, that's another glaze that I mix up that's called charcoal, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It feels and kind of looks like charcoal. But what I've found in experimenting with it, I really love this surface. Like this particular red does really well on top of charcoal. This is underglaze on top of the charcoal. Gives you all sorts of weird, crusty, gnarly, weird stuff. And that's what I like. And so like this hat, this ear, that's that combination. So that's underglaze on top of charcoal. And I'm happy to share recipes. It's not anything I invented. I did a lot of testing years ago of different crawl glazes, and there's lots of them out there now. They're making things commercially that they didn't 20 years ago. But I like this combination, and I think the more you use it, like you can get a lot with a little. Like the crawl glaze can be a semi-transparent glaze without all the crawling. But if I really want it to crawl, I know how to do that. I can apply it thicker, or I can change the viscosity in the bucket, meaning I just take a scoop of it out and put it in a jar and I let it sit out until it starts to thicken up as the water evaporates off of it. Instead of trying to find a totally different glaze, I'm just going to use this one, and I'm going to use it in 3 different ways. That's how my brain works. All right. How are we doing on time?
9 minutes.
Oh, shoot. All right. I'm going to, well, they're not going to kick us out, right? Does it run out of tape? I'll pass around a couple of these. So this glazing technique that I'm going to show you now, I don't know if it's interesting or not, but I've enjoyed messing around with it. This is, so these were made on a wheel. I like making T-bowls. I like using them. But this fade thing that I've been doing with my sculptures, I was experimenting with it with pots. And so it's very similar in what I'll show you in application. This has just been bisqued. It doesn't have any clear glaze on it. The interior and that bottom undercut, I'm not worried about, because I'll, as you see, use a different glaze on the bottom of that. So I don't keep repeating myself, but I made a bunch of pots around the holiday. I did participated in a art fair thing out at Vinland Valley nursery, and I haven't made any since. And that was, November, December. But I will sometimes use this same process with the heads that I make. And this is a dud that was in the bone pile because it cracked. But I'm just going to use it as a demo piece and contribute it to Bracker's dumpster after this. Let's see if I can do this without getting too crazy. Cindy told me I could take whatever I wanted off the shelves. I should have gone for the brighter colors. Those are usually more expensive. Oh well.
What did you say that one is?
This is ivory beige. I like it.
Just a regular glaze.
This is underglaze. All of these are underglazes. Again, like I'm being pretty loose and aggressive with this. The cool thing about underglaze, I think, is the variety of colors that are reliable as heck. they don't have any flux in them, right? So they're not going to run. I suppose if you applied this too thick, it could flake off. But you'd really have to do a number on it. But I like the reliability. It's similar to like slips. Slips are great, but for slips, colored slips, that step in the process of applying it is you're going to do it when it's unfired for the most part, and it goes back to I feel like I lose some of the texture that I build into the pieces. All right, so this is just a base layer, and I would be far more careful about the top and details, but what I'm looking for is as this terracotta starts to absorb the moisture, you'll start to see the sheen on the wet underglaze start to change and how it reflects. I like to start mixing when it's starting to look a little gummy, like it's, I don't know, I don't have a better description. But definitely not when it's dry. Oh, where's that black? Usually I have like 3 tables going at, because once you contaminate, especially one of those expensive reds, that's when the cursing really happens. And for underglazes that I use quite a bit, like this ivory and black, it's at least a pint that I would use. So then these like longer, loose bristle brushes are great for blending. If it was dry, if that white or ivory was too dry, I'm just going to add a little more. Because again, you can get away with thickness with underglaze. Yeah, that's all right.
When you apply your underglaze over your glaze, do you have any problems with it pulling glaze off, like starting to wash it away?
Not with the charcoal. You have to time it right. Like that charcoal, when I apply the charcoal, it's brittle, and so you want it to be dry. It's got borax in it. It's really gritty, and so if you don't have a loose bristle brush like it, and once that charcoal starts to absorb the moisture, it it starts to pull it off the pot. So I guess I said 2 different things. I should have brought like 2 more of these bigger brushes. This is like playing a new song in front of people, like better have practiced. And having clean water is always helpful, but work with what you got.
I don't know if there's an answer
I think you answered that question. That's a good one, and it's different for everyone, I'm sure. I think sometimes if I'm making certain types of work, mostly the sculptural work, like I do draw a lot, and so I doodle, and not for the purpose of like I'm going to make a head out of this. It's just I think of drawing. It's just an exercise for me. I mean, I'd rather do that than like stare at a phone or waste time in other ways. And but I use that as a reference. So sometimes, like when it's finished, the sculpture is finished. If there's a drawing that sparks an idea, then I've got that reference, and so that to me is like that's a bit of an indicator that that's the target that I'm after. This is not going to work, but we're going to give it a shot. And watch yourselves. So again, I look at the sheen, like it's still wet at the top. This is getting drier. Maybe you can see that from here, and I'll try not to get everybody wet. Sometimes this guy is better. But that fade that you see on those cups, this is the technique that I've been using, and I use different colors. But I rehydrate it, and it starts to run. And what I'm aiming for is I'm drawn to like it's other surfaces like metal. Like I grew up in a steel town and surrounded by things that were just dirty, and trains are really good at this, but that industrial surface that I think when I say it, then maybe you start to see it. There's something about it that resonates with me. Here's my problem. I'll tell you, this is not a knock on Amico, but sometimes the underglazes are different viscosities. So like this is thicker, and I should have watered that down a little bit more. So it doesn't want to run because it's thicker. So this demo is going to bust. But we'll wing it, see what happens. I've done experiments with different colors. It's not specific to ceramics. It's just color theory that I like, that work well together, like the gray, the black to ivory, and then sometimes there's one over there called cinnamon that I like quite a bit. So I'm gonna probably let this one sleep. But if it's going poorly, like this is going poorly, I would set this aside and fix this, meaning thin it down. But once this dries, I can just go over it again with something else. I can do the same process all over again once it dries. And that's the kind of the cool thing about velvet underglazes is that they're pretty dexterous in that way, if that makes sense. So let's just put that aside. And so then the process, so that bisque cup that's floating around, that went into the kiln. No, I'm sorry. Then I would apply a clear glaze over the top of that, and the liner glaze that's on the interior, that's just another commercial glaze, liner glaze, and then this glaze that's on the bottom. I forget what it is. It's some shiny black. But the imagery, you might ask, like, well, what's that? That's just underglaze as well. So when it's at that stage, then I might take just a regular number 2 pencil, draw out whatever it is, and then I take my underglazes and draw in these goofy things. And then what you can see on like the brighter colors in particular, hopefully you can see the result that I was looking to do with this thing. But the sort of fading, again, like right there, I take an underglaze pencil and will make little marks. Then I just take my thumb and smear it, so it looks like it's sort of patinaed as well. And then once I'm done with all of that, then it's a clear glaze that goes over where the underglaze has been applied. You can pass that around if you want. Does that make sense? And then that's it. And then you sell them all and you get really rich and you get to come to Brackers and talk about it. Yeah, so that's really, that's the process. This is a thing that I'd made a couple years back. I did all these Hank Williams tiles. This glaze is, I think it's the same as that one. I think it's no longer allowed because it's not good for us or the environment, but I got a bottle of it.
So it's just the opposite of that one.
Yep. That's it. And so what else can I mean, I know some of you here from the Lawrence Art Center. I work at the Lawrence Art Center, and I've been there for 20 years. Taught ceramics classes, have done lots of things with Brackers and KU and other folks in the region. But I went to Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville and learned with Dan Anderson, and then went to graduate school at Ohio University, and then came here. And yeah, Lawrence is a great ceramics town, and like I said earlier, we're lucky to have a shop like this readily available.
Where did you grow up in?
I grew up in Granite City, Illinois. It's just outside of St. Louis, Steel Town, and then I was sort of reared in my ceramics. I took ceramics because I had to. I was a drawing major, and then I'd always heard the ceramics program was really hard, and the teachers were harder. And but I gravitated to it. My dad was a public school art teacher, so I had experiences with making my whole life, but definitely grew up in a town that was not always the case. And I worked in all of those factories and did all sorts of crazy manual labor jobs while in college, and but made a choice that I didn't really want to do that kind of stuff forever. But I do think what I said earlier about the steps and the rules that you have to follow, if you were going to put me on a couch and diagnose some things, there is probably something to the order that has to happen with ceramics. But I also love that ceramics can do just about anything you want it to do, and it can mimic any surface in the world. It's as basic as it gets, with pinching a pinch pot to you name it. We're surrounded by it. It paves our streets. It's our toilet. Like it's everywhere. It lines the space shuttle. Like ceramics is awesome in that way. So yeah, I'll always go back to it. I don't get to make as much in the last many months, but I got to teach this summer when I haven't taught in 10 years, and it was fun. I was actually quite anxious about the whole situation, but yeah, I like it. That's all I got.